Fruit and veg prices are to rise unless Starmer delays the new Brexit border checks. I'm going to read into this exclusive from iNews, you guys. Let's go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Reganelite here, an exclusive from iNews with the headline that fruit and veg prices are to rise unless Starmer delays the new Brexit border checks. The exclusive reveals that ministers are under pressure to pause checks amid warnings that £200 million of extra costs will be passed on to the consumer. Guys, while you're here, make sure you hit the like button and share this across social media so others are notified of this video. So, this is a very difficult situation that Labour have found themselves in, not of their fault, because of the Brexit deal that Boris Johnson signed off. The Conservatives have left us in. They have kicked this can down the road for too long. And regardless of how you guys feel about Brexit, and as much as I hate it, he's got to implement the border checks. Now, the argument, obviously, and rightfully so, is do we have the staff? Do we have the structure? Do we have the infrastructure? Sorry, do we have that in place for these checks? If we have most of this in place, then we need to impose the Brexit border checks. We need to do it. And yes, of course, it's going to drive increases in prices. If we don't do this, all we're doing is just kicking the same problem down the road. But there is an even bigger problem if you keep kicking it down the road as well. So, obviously, our relationship with our partners in Europe, our friends in Europe, obviously has been strained by this pathetic Conservative government who've not been having proper negotiations and talking about, not been implementing their side of the Brexit deal that they signed, and have consistently dragged their feet on this. Now, if the UK was to have future negotiations or talks about making improvements or amendments down the line, not now, listen to what I'm saying because people misinterpret what I say in the comments, but further down the line, if they wanted to talk with the EU about perhaps making changes or amendments to the Brexit deal that they have, not outright a brand new deal because that's not possible. And I'm not talking about the next review that's coming up. I'm talking about a couple of years from now. They're not going to have any kind of those talks, even with a Labour government that is more favourable to the EU than the Conservatives are. And the reason is down to trust. And the EU needs to make sure, wants this UK government to implement what was agreed by Boris Johnson and his government. I know nobody wants that to come into fruition, and nobody wants to be paying more for fruit and veg. And I can just see the right-wing media saying, "Oh, look, this is all Starmer's fault. This is all Labour government's fault that fruit and veg prices have gone up." And it's like, no, this is the deal that Boris Johnson signed. But that's what the media will portray. That's what the right wingers, that's what the nut jobs will say. They will say this is all Starmer's fault, when they clearly have not been. Even they know that what they're saying is wrong, but they're still going to do that anyway. And it's going to hurt Keir Starmer. It's going to hurt his appeal. Whatever he does here, whether he delays it or implements the border checks, because on one hand, if he delays it, a relationship will always be at a strain, and we will never rebuild that trust with our European partners because we're not upholding our end of the bargain in the deal. But if he puts this in, obviously it's going to hurt consumers. The media are going to ramp it up, quadruple it, and say Starmer, Labour are making prices going up, raising taxes because taxes were expected to rise anyway in the Chancellor budget. So all these things will be thrown out in front pages of the likes of the Daily Mail, the Telegraph, the Express, saying, "Look what Labour's doing, they're harming this country, blah blah blah," sort of thing. And unfortunately, that's the reality of what happens when you don't reform the media. And that's why we're in the situation. It's just a terrible situation for him to be in. But he's going to have to find a way to come out of this. And I think If I was in Labour's position in this situation, I think I would go with the Brexit border checks, because we need to have, yes, of course, you are harming consumers, and yes, we are in a cost of living crisis. Yes, I understand the anger and the frustration, and that comes with it all. And I know it's going to hurt the supermarkets and the fruit and veg on the shelves. Believe me, it will. I'm not going to argue that. It's going to hurt significantly. But we can't not put these checks in. We can't keep kicking things down the road that we signed up for. I say we, Boris Johnson in his Brexit oven-ready deal signed up for. We signed an agreement, and you have to when you sign a contract, you have to stick to that contract. It's a sad reality, unfortunately, guys. So yeah, we are going to get hurt by this, but I just don't see a way out of this, really. So British shoppers are facing higher food prices unless the government fixes another Brexit headache by delaying looming border checks on importing food from the EU, so Keir Starmer has been warned. And what exactly is delaying it going to do? You're still going to have to implement it at some point. What are we going to delay it for? Oh, what? Until the economy is fixed? Is that what it is? Are we going to delay it until the economy is fixed? Until the cost of living crisis is fixed? Is that what we're going to delay it for, guys? Ministers are being told to delay or stop checks on fruit and veg, and that could begin from January and are expected to add food inflation, creating a huge extra financial burden for hard-pressed consumers. In response to questions from the eye, the government subsequently confirmed it is now considering delaying these checks to July 2025 as part of a review, a key demand of industry which was not under consideration as recently as 2 weeks ago. Now, is the reason they're delaying it is because the checks are not ready? So, yeah, it's part of a review here. So something tells me the checks are not ready then, if that is the case. So they're going to be kicking this down the road. In 2022, the UK imported more than half its fruit and vegetables, nearly 80% of them from the EU. Failure to delay the checks will add £200 million to the fruit and veg industry annual cost, which funds will have to pass on to the consumer, the Fresh Produce Consortium chief executive Nigel Jenney had warned. Stella Creasy MP, who chairs the pro-EU Labour Movement for Europe, said that those already struggling at the cost of living face a bad situation about to get worse. Last week, an Institute for Fiscal Studies, the IFS, identified the phenomenon of cheapflation, with poor households paying 29.1% more of their foods between 2021 and 2023, compared to 23.5% for wealthier households. See, this is the thing, like, they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't. This is the problem. But we have to implement these checks at some point. We can't keep kicking the problems down the road. So people need to understand that. I get I totally understand the fury that people will have about this. I really do. I really do. Border checks on several types of EU food imports, including meat, fish, dairy, were introduced this year. The introduction followed years of delays from the Conservatives, and despite an admission from the former governments last year that they would add 0.2% to food price inflation over 3 years. But fruit and vegetables were exempt from much of the post-Brexit red tape, a result of the UK leaving the single market until October this year, with the government later confirming it intended to push it further back to January 2025. Now pressure is growing on ministers to delay the checks again. And Creasy has gone further, calling for a pause on all border controls on the EU food imports, pending a review of how quickly the government can strike a veterinary agreement with Brussels, which it hopes would remove the need for much of the control and red tape. The Labour MP said border checks would have one confirmed impact, further pressures on inflation, and one likely but not seen impact. Companies deciding not to trade and import on things into the UK, which will have a knock-on effect in terms of food supply and the quality of food. I'm just thinking about the veterinary agreement. But it's not like something that it can take a couple of weeks or a couple of months. It's going to take a while to get an agreement with that. That's not a 5-minute thing. None of that is good for British consumers in charge in terms of choice or cost of food, she said. So this is the Brexit headache that is hanging over from the last government that we need to fix. The government has already allowed the phased introduction of controls on imports, and of EU goods to wait until the 31st of July 2025, easing the requirements of certain official documents and the level of control on animals, plants and other imports from the consignment. This raised the fruit and veg industry's hopes that they would have more time to prepare. But the Eye has learned that officials told the fresh produce industry this month that there would not be a delay to July of controls, including border inspections, fees and paperwork requirements for fruit and veg. The government has not made a decision on whether to downgrade several types of food imports from the medium to low risk categories, including turnips, beetroot, carrot, ginger, sweet potato, turmeric, celery, swede, horseradish and rashers. Yeah. Leading to a warning that nearly half, 48% of fruit and veg will need a higher level of checks, and this could mean severe disruptions. Yeah. In a letter to the Environment Secretary Steve Reed, seen by the Eye, the Fresh Produce Consortium, FPC, said the situation means that the industry feels unable to prepare efficiently as there is no clarity on the dates the checks will be introduced or what goods they will face controls. Mr. Jenney said delays to July would allow the industry to prepare. Without this, he predicted and warned that the overall impact on food price inflation would be worse than 0.2% of the previous predicted by the government. Mr. Jenney told the Eye that checks will cause huge delays at the border and huge costs. The government will say this is not a food inflationary. A recent report suggested a 0.2% impact on food inflation overall. However, that was a statement made well before they confirmed what fees are for industry. We would estimate alone that our sector is over £200 million on costs annually. Mr. Jenney said there is a pragmatic, sensible solution. The government is new into post, and there is a huge opportunity to simplify the process whilst maintaining the UK's biosecurity that takes huge pressure off the industry and take huge costs off consumers. It just feels like it's a crap situation we are in, guys. He added, we are possibly in the honeymoon phase, but the industry patience is rapidly wearing thin, so we do need urgent clarification and urgent change. Creasy said that as well as veterinary agreements, the UK should seek to join the Pan-European Mediterranean Convention on Compliance so-called Rules of Origin, which also complicates food imports. Controls already introduced in January and April this year on other types of food were already providing torturous for industry, she explained. If you talk to anyone at the ports and anyone trying to import into the UK, and the invoices only just started dropping, it's a nightmare. She said the discussion of this so far has been much about the delis, but actually it's corner shops. It's the small-scale fish and carry importers who are really going to feel as the major supermarkets are taking a bit of a hit in the long run on the basis that actually some of the competitors will go out of business. We do not want to lose the small markets and corner shops, guys. We don't. That will really hurt. It will really hurt a lot of people. Pretty cat. Mr. Jenney also said that he was sympathetic to call for pause checks entirely, given the new government was seeking a veterinary deal, also known as an SPS deal. Although food companies are understood to be sceptical that an agreement can be reached quickly and believe it will take years of negotiations. It will take years to negotiate. If there is an opportunity to have a closer working relationship with the EU through the SMP agreement, then that is sooner rather than later. Let's not pull all this infrastructure in place at a huge cost, he said. Jill Ratia, the Institute for Government, the IFG, also questioned why the government would introduce the controls only to turn them down if and when does a veterinary deal with the EU. That's a very good point. If we're pushing for a veterinary deal, there's no point building the infrastructure if we're going to get that veterinary deal. If you thought you were going to get an all signing, all dancing SMP agreement, then you need to go up the hill of introducing checks only to remove them again. But she suggested ministers may want to impose controls due to the asymmetric current system that allows EU producers to export to the UK free of red tape, while British firms face full controls in the other direction. If we start doing checks, that might up the pressure of some EU states to be interested in doing SPS deals with the UK. Introducing the checks might also build trust with the EU, severely damaging during the Brexit saga, she explained. The EU has big question marks about the UK's enforcement regime, and one of them is whether they trust the UK's regulatory regime if we're going to allow a freer access into the UK, she said. They might think a failure to enforce against the EU goods might lead to failure to enforce against other goods that might then circulate into Northern Ireland and get into the EU. A government spokesperson said, we are working to reset the relationship with our European friends to strengthen ties, improve investment and tackle the barriers to trade. Risk-based checks on certain imports are essential to produce our national biosecurity and prevent an outbreak of disease that would severely damage our food supply, the environment and future trade. Analysis shows checks will have minimal impacts on food prices and consumers, with just a 0.2% point increase on food prices over the next 3 years. So yeah, but they did say obviously they would push for a veterinary agreement. The Labour government, they have said that in the past. They have said that. That is for sure. But how long is it going to take to get that veterinary agreement? So is what we are thinking is that Labour are going to just keep kicking the can until they get a veterinary agreement, which could take a couple of years to do? Is that ideal? Is that the best thing to do? Would the EU understand that position if possible? I'm not sure. There's a lot of question marks there, guys. It's difficult, but yeah. As of right now, it's the problem is we're not checking, and we need to have those borders, guys. The border checks at some point. But this veterinary deal that they want, it's not a 5-minute thing, like they said, like it says in the article. It's going to take years to get. And this is Brexit, guys. The gift that keeps on giving. But, you know, as Brexiteers will say, sovereignty, right? You know, sovereignty. Yeah. How's that sovereignty going? But what do you guys honestly think? What do you guys make of this position that Starmer finds himself in at the expense of Boris Johnson leaving us in this mess, the Conservatives leaving us in this mess? I really do not give me the crap excuse that this is Labour's fault, because this is not. You don't have a leg to stand on if this is to do with Labour. But if you want to throw that if you want to make up false information in the comments, we can do so. But I wouldn't advise against it. But honestly, like, what was Boris Johnson and the Conservatives thinking when they signed this deal? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. If you found this video interesting or informative, please hit the like button. We greatly appreciate it. Share it across social media so others are notified of this video. And subscribe, because it really does help support the channel. And if you want to go one step further, financially support me and the work that I do here, you can do so by becoming a YouTube member for as little as 99p. Or join me on Rumble or Patreon for exclusive content on those platforms. So thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to catch you all very, very soon.